Hey everybody. Welcome to indoor season. I'm a little bit behind the times. Everybody's at Neem right now having fun. Well, actually everyone at Neem right now is sleeping, having fun, but I'm a little bit behind and need to kick myself in gear and get ready for indoor season here. So I thought I'd do a little live feed and talk with you guys about several different things. One that I've continually been getting questions about regarding indoor setup, and then we'll talk about a few things with that. I want to talk about a few things with releases specifically, and then we're going to get into talking a little bit about indoor. So this is going to be as organic and true as it comes right here, because other than me building this bow and probably putting maybe 5 or 6 rounds through it, I've been on the road nonstop for 3 weeks. So I haven't even got to shoot. I'm out of shooting shape, so to speak, and I've been working on a lot of different things, doing a lot of different little tuning things. So I'm in a learning process myself. So I want to talk about that as well. So this is my bow. I'm pretty sure we built this together. This is the Prevail. And one thing I guess I want to first start working on is trying to figure out, one, if the bow is fit perfectly for me, which in just a few arrows that I've shot here, I actually feel like it's just a fuzz long. But you know, the reality is sometimes when your bow might feel like it's a little bit different, it could be me just as easy as it could be the bow. I haven't pulled it back on the drawboard to check it if it's perfect, but you know, when you first start shooting and you haven't been shooting for most of the season, especially those of you who are hunters and you're used to just hunting most of the time, now indoor leagues are starting, all those sorts of things. You start to really focus on your technique. And I know for me, the front shoulder position, just my posture, I'm used to being sitting in a stand. Half the times I draw my bow, I haven't really been focused on super repetitive form, but now that I'm indoors, this is the time of year where you really want to do that. The great thing about indoor archery is that you're able to eliminate all the different elements that cause variations in technique and variations in execution. So I really like to just try to focus on shooting indoors enough to where, one, I'm not getting tired and just making sloppy shots, but I really just try to focus on getting in a groove to where you just become like a machine, like something on a factory floor where you're just processing the same thing over and over and over again. So there's a lot of different subjects that I know are relative to this, so I'm just going to dive into some on my own. If I start shooting indoor archery, right now I'm going to start close, just to do what I call getting my stroke. I really like to focus on training at the beginning of my archery stuff, just working on my stroke, my timing, pulling through, and really getting warmed up. Because especially if you're someone who is trying to improve your scores, you know, bad shots or negative scoring is all imprinting. It imprints in the mind. So I really like to make sure that I'm feeling good and I've got a good stroke and I'm warmed up before I really start putting arrows in scoring rings. That's just me. A lot of guys can pick up cold turkey and just go after it, but I personally like to go into a range. I like to start practicing on a used face that's there, because the reality is, even though I'm capable of shooting 300s and capable of shooting super high X counts in FIDA archery, I also miss the Vegas 10 a lot more frequently than what people think. And that's because if I'm cold, if my head's not into it, if I'm a little bit foggy minded, then it's just not all going to come together right away. And I want to be upfront and honest with you who are watching and understand that that is all part of being an archer. And if you're doing that, don't be frustrated by it. You just have to embrace it, and you have to kind of learn your own body and read your own body language. Are you someone that might need 20 or 30 minutes to warm up before you really want to start putting holes in paper? There's a lot of guys that are like that. There's some that can just shoot 3 or 4 or 5 and they're ready to go. If I'm in the peak of a season, I can do that. But when I'm first starting out like this, there's a very good chance that I'm gonna be maybe okay, I'm gonna get rusty, I'm gonna get tired, and then I'll probably get a second wind and I'll come back through it. So what I'm gonna do first is I'm just gonna start here, and I'm gonna shoot these first arrows with the silverback. I really like using tension activation to just focus on, again, pulling through the stroke, trying to just get my timing right, and just trying to warm up that front half of my body and go from there. We're gonna talk throughout this about sights and rests and also arrow configurations. I guess for right now, what I've got here, I've actually got two different, I've kind of got a little smorgasbord here because I don't know if we're going to be able to get into this tonight. We might, but over the next couple days, I'm going to have all of you tune in if you want to with some of these training sessions and some of these trial and error sessions, because I'm really unsure right now exactly what I want for my equipment. I have a very good idea of where I would start, but that doesn't mean that's where I'm going to finish. So I've got a set of 2315s here with a 3-inch AAE max stealth vane. I really liked this vane last year. Sometimes I shoot a 4-inch feather. I've shot a 4-inch vane, but this vane with a pretty decent little offset, which I'll show you right there. It's got about 1.5 degrees on it. Has shot really well for me. I really like to make sure that I'm shooting an offset to where when I load this on, I still have clearance with my blade. Now, there's been a lot of questions about launcher blades, meaning for most target archers, you'll see that there's actually a launcher blade here. You also call them a lizard tongue, or a traditional like limb-driven or fall-away style rest. Now, in the past, I've just been accustomed to shooting a launcher blade for my target stuff. I'm actually going to challenge myself this year, and I'm going to get this bow shooting as good as I can over this next week, and then I'm going to change from the blade to a limb-driven fall-away, and I'm going to try to see if I'm able to duplicate or even better those scores with the limb-driven system versus the launcher blade. So that's my setup. This particular arrow has a 220 grain point in it. The other arrows are actually a little bit shorter and have 180 grain. So this is going to be a little bit stiffer spine. I pretty much built these other arrows here. They're about 1 inch shorter with 180 grain point. So they're almost equivalent to me changing my poundage on my bow about 1.5 pounds is what I figure. So if I shoot these and I kind of see as good as I can shoot with these, and then I switch to the other ones and shoot, I'm going to get a pretty quick determination of just what I should be doing, whether I should be going stiffer or whether the bow actually like that weaker spine. And then in that case, my next round, I would actually come in with more point weight, or I would decrease my poundage on my bow to try to see if a little bit weaker shaft would actually respond even better than my starting point. So I'm gonna go ahead and make a few shots here. James, if there's anything relative question-wise, you can spit it out. Again, I'm just gonna focus on my process. I'm gonna just sit here and, well, I guess I'll probably just shoot at those 3 dots coming down the right side of that target. Just focusing on my stance position. I always rest my front shoulder in between every shot. I personally don't like to have a rear stabilizer that is in my way and making me having to maneuver around it. And just focus on my stance. I'm going to focus a lot of attention on that front shoulder, and then hopefully trying to warm up my pull. I feel like probably right now, because I haven't shot enough, I think my front shoulder will probably stay strong enough. I feel like my pull through historically is what takes time to develop. So that's pretty much it. You can see I was pulling really hard right there.
Jason Breland asked, can you effectively compete with a hunting bow indoors?
Sure. I actually, I've had hunting bows where I know I can shoot them just as good as I can my target bow. And I asked Randy Ulmer one time, I said, what do you think people would think if you came to Vegas with your hunting bow? And he just looked at me and said, I think they'd think you were pretty stupid. And that was it. I never decided to do it, but I've always questioned it. And actually, the cleanest NFA 5-spot round I've ever shot in a professional event was at the NFA Nationals. Shot a perfectly clean round with a hunting model. It was this was probably, I don't know, 10 or 15 years ago. I actually shot it with a Matthews LX, had a 6-inch brace height, and I shot it with my hunting arrows, and it was, I was surprised a lot of people. But on that first shot there, as soon as I let off this safety, the shot went. I'm shooting a silverback. So what that's telling me is I'm actually probably pulling a little bit harder than what I'm going to settle into. And again, we've talked about setting the silverback heavy to start with, especially if you're just learning, because you want to be able to let off that safety and almost pull harder than you need to get through that shot. The more you start to settle in and get comfortable, the more you're going to be able to decrease that weight to where you'll be able to let off and you're comfortable in that valley, and then you start to pull through. Now the cam system on my target bow is quite a bit different than the cam system on my hunting bow. There's less let off, so I'm holding, you know, I've got a kind of a little bit, I guess, more demanding valley. So, you know, I know that, so I'm probably pulling a lot harder than what I really need to right now, just because I want to make sure that I'm not creeping forward on these 65% modules.
Tim Taylor's asked, why did you choose those cams over the more aggressive Spiral or SVX now?
So the Spiral cams have always been, there's been years where I've liked them, and there's been years where I didn't get along with them. It really depends on the bow, and some bows at my draw length, the Spiral cam with the valley is fairly short. I don't really like a short valley. I kind of like to have the ability to be a little bit lazier on the back wall. So I've really liked the GTX cams personally, and it allows me to shoot a little bit more weight. I'll shoot right around 61 pounds. With the Spiral cams, when I've shot them the best, I've shot in the low 50s to mid 50s. And I may try a bow with the new ones, but for right now I'm just going with something that's a little bit more forgiving, I think, and a lot of that has to do with my ability to actually practice. And this is really important for you at home, because if you're not able to practice continually a lot, then buying a bow that's super demanding, or a cam system that's demanding, or brace height that's demanding, you're going to put yourself in an awkward position, because you're not going to really be tuned up enough to continually shoot that bow accurately. I like to know that I'm going to be able to pick up my bow if I haven't got to shoot for a few days, and still be able to make shots without the bow trying to take the string away from me.
Cole Amsden asked, besides shooting more, what are some ways to overcome fatigue and a sloppy pin float towards the end of a long match when shooting a heavy bow?
Well, the best thing that you can do with that is you need to recognize that that's happening, and it's good that you do recognize that, because you actually need to build a set that's easier for you to shoot than really what you think you need, and something that's still manageable at the end of the round. That's really important because a lot of people think that just because they can shoot a bow good for 20 shots or 25 shots, that they're comfortable with that and they want to just muster through it. But those last 5, 6 arrows, or sometimes those last 2 ends, are the toughest ends of the entire round. And if you're fatigued, then you're pretty much setting yourself up for disaster. You need to be able to make sure that you're honest with yourself and you've got something that you can manage for the whole round, and not just something that you're managing well at the beginning.
James Kirk asks, how do you adjust bottom cameline on that bow with no split yoke?
So on a Hoyt in particular, you're going to adjust the cameline either by switching these bushings, or you'll have to take this apart and actually flip the limbs. Sometimes can help. I've never really ran into a situation where it's excessive. I actually worked with the Matthews engineers at the ATA show specifically about cam lean and cam lean tuning. Not necessarily issues, but in case there is an issue with cam lean and tuning, we actually went through and talked about their bushing system and their shimming system, and actually how that can be adjusted to change that tune. I've actually got a bow on the way, and I plan on doing a video to be able to show all you Matthews watchers exactly how to do that, or at least tell you what it is, so that if you take it to your dealer, they'll be able to do that for you. Your dealers have kits where they can do that and adjust that cam lean in case you're having any type of tuning issue. Okay, we're going to come up, pull arrows.
Matt Moen asks, what length target stabilizers do you suggest starting with? Go ahead and start long or stay short first.
So stabilizers are something that I think a lot of people, a lot of kids start out maybe too long. And I personally, when it comes to stabilizer length, my stabilizers are fairly light. You can see I don't shoot much weight. I like to keep weight towards the center of my bow, and I like my length to where when I set my bow down, it allows me to rest my front shoulder. Now, if you're a kid, you may be better off with a 24-inch, or if you're a gal, you might want a 24 or an 18-inch. Getting ones that are too long start to really become problematic, especially when you're in the wind. Now this time, James, I'm going to shoot a few more. I need to get a little bit looser. You can just kind of come into maybe different little angles if you want to. If you want to come in close to my release hand or close to my anchor, and do that so everyone can just kind of watch. But yeah, just maybe come in, and I'm going to shoot a few different shots here. And you guys can just look at different things and then ask. See, right now, my timing and my stroke is, if I were to rate it, I would say it's probably a 6 out of 10. I'm definitely rusty right now. But that's what's nice about the silverback, is you can do this for 10 or 20 minutes and you can pull yourself out of that.
Chris Christensen asks, what causes front arm shaking while aiming on the pull through for young archers like 15 years old?
Hey Chris, how are you, buddy? Chris has at least if it's a Chris I'm thinking about, Chris has a pretty cool archery shop in Illinois. It's called Obsession Archery. It's one of the cooler logos I've ever seen from an archery shop. But front arm shake, and I'm gonna make this shot and then I'll finish talking. Front arm shake starts to develop, one, from kids that are trying to maintain too much weight on their stabilizer systems. Super common. A lot of younger archers are trying to look up to someone that they see the way that they're, they'll look at a top pro and they see how their bow's set up. They see this sight, all the gear, and the bottom line is just the physicality and the overall weight of that bow just really starts to wear them down. You have to be really careful with younger archers because there's a lot of parts to them that aren't developed yet. I know this. I actually just got another stem cell injection, 2 of them in this right arm, because I grew so fast and they had me throwing footballs and baseballs so much that I really never was able to develop my tendons and my ligaments in my knees and my elbows. And you have to be careful of that. A lot of people that start to have their youth shoot too much pulling weight or too heavy of poundage, you'll notice that they'll really start to lock out this arm. And if you look through years of that archer developing, that front arm will start to develop hyperextension and it'll actually start to arch. The more that starts to arch, the more likely that's going to start to develop that shaking motion that you say. So some shake is going to be necessary because if you are pulling through, you are going to have a little bit. But I think overall, if you can really minimize how much physical weight the bow is that they're holding and the physical weight of what they're pulling, I think you can minimize that quite a bit. Plus, there's a lot of really small muscles within the front shoulder to have this in the proper place. There's some on me. I had a question today. They were saying that they started shooting a silverback and that front shoulder just really started to almost burn. It was fatiguing. And that's super common. I feel that too. If I haven't shot for a long time, there's very minor, small finesse muscles within that front shoulder, within the scapula stability system, that if you're not using them, they're just small muscles that will start screaming because they haven't been worked. So you have to develop those, and they do develop very fast. But you have to stay on it. That's why I feel like even if you're not able to go to a range and shoot full rounds, if you can do this, I could be perfectly happy doing this for 100 arrows tonight. And I know that tomorrow I could come in here and probably shoot a way better round than what I'm probably going to shoot tonight, simply because I've just focused on the technique, warming up some of those muscles and just getting them used to it again.
Alan Harker asks, when picking a blade for your rest, how do you decide whether to go with an 8, a 10, or a 12? I know they have charts for weight, but do you follow that?
Okay, so I've found, and I'll show you a few things here. We talked a little bit about arrows. I'm gonna shoot a few arrows here with the first ones that I built. As long as I'm making decent shots, which I might not make decent shots to start with, but if I'm making decent shots, I'll be able to kind of show you a few things with that. But when it comes to the blades, I like to have a blade. One, I set my blade angle at about this angle right here. I don't like my blade being too vertical like this, because what will happen is when you shoot through, it'll push down and it'll actually come back up and hit the back of your arrow. So if you get high knock tears continually through paper, a lot of times that's going to be directly because your blade angle's too stiff or too steep, or it's too stiff. So with this particular arrow that I have here, amazingly enough, this is one of the first times I've ever needed one, but this is actually a 12 thousandths blade. You can see there is a little bit of give there to this, but the reason I'm shooting the 12 is because I actually laid it flatter than what I normally would. If I turn this, if this proves to be a little bit too stiff and I start to have some up and downs, then what I'm going to do is I'll go back to a 10 thousandths blade, and the 10 thousandths might have a little bit too much spring in it, so I'll just slightly move that angle up and it'll stiffen it, or it'll give it, you know, it'll pretty much stiffen the blade because you're not laying it down so much. Well, let's go back here. I'll shoot a few more arrows.
Alex Gutierrez asks, kind of ties into what you're saying. I have a question. Your bow is so quiet. My bow has a metallic sound on the rest, like it's clinging when it shoots.
Yep.
What causes that?
So what's happening is your blade is probably too vertical. So it's actually that, you know, that blade is kind of going fling like that as it goes through. Now, if you look here at my arrows, you know, you can see here on my shaft, you can see right here where there's two blades riding through this whole shaft, and they actually typically just barely touch right at the front edge of my vinyl, and at that point this arrow is actually clearing. So I want to make sure that the arrow is riding that rest through the cycle. You know, you don't want to see where the rest is touching, coming clear, touching, back and forth. You don't want that. Someone actually sent in a picture of the Elevate whale tail, and there was a little bit of wear on the plastic, and they asked if that was normal. Now, it is normal because it's plastic, it's gonna wear, but once you wear through a little bit, you're gonna be touching the spring steel. You're not gonna wear through that. But what was notable about that particular one was that there was more wear on one side. You can come back further. There was more wear on one side of that launcher than on the other. So what that tells me is that he's actually probably has either torque in the bow or his hand. And what's happening is if you have your arrow rest and you're torquing it, then it'll ride one side. Whichever way you're torquing that rest, your arrow will ride that one side. So the wear on plastic is normal. That's to help keep it quieter. But if it's wearing only on one side, then you might want to pay attention to whether or not you have a little bit of a torque issue in your front hand position. So, and actually, this is a new heater that I've got here in the shop, so it was burning some oil. It's like a foggy English day in here right now. So one of the questions that we saw when we posted that we were doing this live feed was Brad Iverson asked the question, how do you, at 20 yards shooting indoors, if you're really trying to fine tune your spine for your arrow, how do you really know it's right? We're gonna be able to know it's right. Even at 20 yards, there's a difference between shooting a 300 round with 20Xs or a 300 round with 28Xs. And your spine match will show you that, and it'll identify it. So what I like to do, I like to warm up typically a lot more than I just did, and I'll shoot on a brand new piece of paper. I'll shoot a full round, sometimes 2 full rounds, and then I'll look at it. If I feel like I'm actually shooting better than I'm scoring, then at that point I'll try a different type of arrow configuration. An easy way to do it is to change your bow poundage. 3 pounds is almost equal to a spine. So you can either do that, or you can change your point weights, you can change to a different spine or lengths. So I'm at the point now where I've actually got a different length and a different point than this one, but I'm gonna start out with this one first, and I haven't really sighted in perfectly, so we'll have to see where these hit. Now, we had a few questions too from people asking specifically about my sight. This is a sure-loc 1. They were wondering which one I have. So this is the 400. It has just 4 inches of adjustment. I shoot the shorter extension bar. I don't like a real long extension bar. I really don't like sights that have a full extension on them. I give myself 2 clicks. But I've got this, and I've got, right now I'm shooting a 7 diopter lens, which is at my draw length, because at my draw length, my scope is a lot further from my eye. So at my draw length, it's equal to about a 6 power lens. And then I've got a peep that's actually, this is considered a small. I don't know if I hold my finger there, if you can see it a little better. But that peep is slightly bigger than this scope housing. I would like it, if I shot outdoors and I had more lighting, I would actually like a slightly smaller peep sight. However, what I found as an indoor archer is there's some ranges that have good lighting, some that have poor lighting. If I set myself up to be sighted in with too small of a peep and I go to a range that has poor lighting, then I end up paying the price for that. Okay. Make a few little clicks. Again, looking down at my stance, my grip. Right now, all the weight's off my front shoulder, stance, grip, raising my bow to the target, drawing back, anchor, peep. And that's what you have to learn to do. You run out of oxygen, and I could feel myself starting to creep. I could feel myself start to break down. I knew it was going to happen, and that's a big part of being an archer, is getting your head around being honest with yourself. You know, I'm not a perfect archer every day. There's days where I can shoot and I can amaze myself, but there's a lot of days where if I'm rusty, I'm only fooling myself coming in here expecting to shoot that way. The reality is I'm in here focusing on eliminating my mistakes. If I would have made that shot, it might have went in, but it just as easily would have not went in. So at this point, I'm really focusing on having a good shot, good consistent timing, and eliminating the shots that I would consider a forced shot. Trying to think if there was, okay, so I'm gonna shoot this last arrow. And I'm actually going to talk about a few little questions we've had.
Kat Burke asks, is there any tips on how to switch from shooting with one eye closed to shooting with both eyes open?
So you ideally you want to shoot with both eyes open because you gather more light. But in some lighting conditions, you can see I'll squint down because I'm really double checking my eclipse. I want to see a perfect circle on circle. Falling out of your peep is what happens when you start to fall low on your peep, and you'll start to see more of your bubble, less of the top of your scope. Super common mistake. It took me a long time to learn to shoot with both eyes open. I actually had to put a blinder on my hat so that I would just cover my left eye. But over time, I started to be able to focus and not see a double image. If you see a double image, you might have to squint that left eye down to see the solid image, and then just slowly start to open it until you still only see the single image. Now, the one thing I can tell you from the first shot to the second shot I really felt unsure in my front shoulder. I think what's happening is I'm trying to focus. I was really focusing a little bit too much on the hold and on the aim. So I'm telling myself right now, just based off my last shot, that I really need to stand proud. I need to keep my posture up. I was shooting small. There's a difference between shooting small like this and standing proud. I need to stand proud, and when I come to full draw, I need to have full expansion in my chest so that I have full leverage here. I'm able to steady the front as I pull through. That's my goal. So. All right. See, those were tough for me. You guys don't believe me, but 3 weeks off, watch that wire. 3 weeks off, and it's tough. It's tough. So, I got 3 supers, but they were tough. So what'll happen is, as I continue to shoot this round, I'm gonna start to notice my pattern. Now, honestly, those 3 shots for me weren't shots that I'm super happy with. So if I'm not totally happy with the shots, I don't really like to rate, what's going on. But what you'll find is, as you complete that round, you're gonna have your misses left and right. Now, this was my first arrow. I knew that I was still a Super X, but I knew I was at the top edge of it, which is why you guys heard me give myself 2 clicks. So I gave myself 2 clicks. So I moved down to where I'd be shooting center. I was a little bit left to center on this one. And then on this one, I knew I was left to center, so that's when I gave the 2 clicks on my sight to the left, and then was able to go back and shoot it in that existing hole. So, but I'm gonna shoot this round. We probably won't. How much time do we have? How long have we been talking? No idea. So I'm gonna shoot this round. I'm gonna see how this target looks. If it looks awesome, I'm probably gonna just shoot it a few more days and try to perfect it. If it starts to look like my lefts and rights are spreading, then again, I'm gonna go to this other arrow, which is a slightly stiffer build, and I'm gonna see how those 2 pieces of paper compare. You'll definitely see a difference if you're shooting a different type of arrow. For me right now, I can tell you, I'm not gonna put a ton of credibility in one arrow over the other in one night, because I'm not shooting enough right now to be able to 100% tell you that this wasn't a placebo, that this arrow just didn't shoot better tonight versus that arrow. Now, one thing I do want to make sure that I talk about tonight is there's been a couple people who've sent Noctuits back because the trigger had broke off. When we get these back, we can tell if you drop them, because when you drop them, you can see where it landed. Now, the parts in releases, and this goes for any good release, is going to be a hardened steel. And if it's hardened, it's going to be hard all the time, so your sears don't start to round off like my fingers. You want your sears to be perfect edges on edges so that there's no travel and they trip. Okay, but the problem is there's always pros and cons to any process. A hardened process, you have great edges. However, when something's hardened, just like if you were to put 5-minute epoxy in your arrows versus hot melt, when it's hardened, they do become more brittle. That's just characteristic. So if you drop your release and it lands on this, there is a chance that you're going to break it. That's going to happen. Good thing is, Forrest Carter knows how to fix them. So you can be honest. Most of the people I've called, I'm like, dude, just tell me, did you drop it? And then they said, yeah, I did. The other thing is, there's been a few situations where some people have actually fired their release through their bow. You don't want to be doing that, okay? And I know that a lot of you out there who are following these live streams are trying handheld releases for your first time. And some of you may have target panic or anxiety to a level where you're just back there and you're holding in that gold and you just let go. Or maybe you were a finger shooter and you just let go. You really want to focus on not doing that. And I'm here to tell you that if you really work on baby steps and, you know, work on shooting on a big target up close so that you can really just get comfortable with how to hold the release, pulling back, coming to your anchor, coming over to the trigger, and then just pulling through and not worrying about the pin, not worrying about that the pin's in the gold. You know, you really have to go backwards a little bit to really learn that process to where you're comfortable with it, and then you're not going to make those mistakes. If you are one of those people who are at home that's done that, listen, there's a ton of people that have done it, and that's really what I want to get across to everyone is how do we work forward from that? How do we get away from that? How do we work towards progress and you not having any type of anxiety when putting your pin on the target? And a lot of that comes from you making the decision yourself that you're going to improve. It's no different than if you want to quit drinking or if you want to quit smoking. You know, a lot of those are super hard habits to break. But if you get to the point where only you and yourself are saying that you are 100% focused on making yourself accomplish that goal, then you're going to be able to do it. And if you're struggling with target panic and you can't pull back, I mean, I'm on a live feed. I haven't shot in front of, you know, thousands of people in a long time. So for me to be able to go back there, I don't feel that great. I was up last night till 1 in the morning in Vegas. Sharon and I had to leave for the airport at 3:30 a.m. and I really wanted to do a live feed for all you. So I'm not feeling the best either, but if you don't feel like you're going to make a good shot, that's just when you have to cancel the shot and let down. Sometimes a letdown, it could be the best shot that you've made all day. You can't, no matter what you do, once you fire that arrow down range, there's no way, at least that I know of, that you can pull that arrow back and put it in your quiver. The only thing that you can control are the arrows that are still in the quiver and the arrows that you haven't fired yet. So if you feel those little moments of anxiety like that, then it's easy to just look at the camera, look at your buddy and just say, that wasn't going to be a good shot and let down. Because if you do that, you're going to find you're going to be way, way happier in the end. All right, let's shoot a few more. I think we're getting pretty low on battery juice. But, oh, okay, let's talk about this. So they're not available yet, but I'm sure any of you, probably most of you archery geeks that are out there, you always notice every single thing I have that isn't like something you saw before. But so we're gonna offer the Elevate Rest with the long bar so that you can come behind the riser. So why would I do that, you would say? This gives me the ability for a couple different things. One, it gives me the ability for torque tuning, which I am going to do a live feed talking specifically about torque tuning, but I need to do that when I'm well in practice. But pretty much what torque tuning is, by adjusting your sight forward or back, you start to find a sweet spot where if you do have any left or right torque in your riser, that because of the distances that this is behind and that the distance this is forward, you'll find a sweet spot where you'll actually miss less left and right, even if you have slight variation in your hand pressure. Now, some model bows, that's a lot more important than others. A bow that's extremely rigid and has a lot of torsional stability, and it doesn't have a lot of pressure on the cables or the cable guard, you'll find that you're able to have slight variation in your hand without having a big variation downrange. But this will be available. You'll be able to buy the Elevate, and you can have any of the configurations, whether you want the whale tail, the full cage, the half cage, any of that. It will be available, we're hoping next week. Don't email and say, where is it? Because it's not on the website right now. When we get them in, hopefully next week, we'll put them out there. They are slightly more expensive for the longer bracket. That's just how it is, but it's not going to be too bad.
I got a question. How do you balance out working out and shooting competitively?
Well, you have to build a routine to where you're not working out immediately after or before. Well, you mainly don't want to work out right before you shoot. So I developed a system back when I was competing a lot, which my competitions were always on Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays. So what I would do is my Mondays would normally be one of my heavier days. Mondays and Wednesdays would be heavier days for lifting. But then Tuesdays and Thursdays would be days where I'd have a little bit lighter lifting, but I would have greater practice days. So what that would allow me to do is I would be shooting in tournaments Saturday and Sunday. Monday I would come home, I'd lift really hard, I'd lift heavy. Then I would use my archery time to really fine-tune any type of issues I might have had or changes I wanted to make. If I wanted to change to a different vein or a different shaft or a different pin in my scope, I would work on those little mechanical things on that Monday. And then Tuesday, I would start to shoot with those. I'd have a good workout, but I wouldn't be as heavy. Wednesday, I would go heavy again, and I would shoot a little bit, but not as much. And then Thursday, I would have a very strong practice day, normally with cardio and my fitness. And then Friday, I would rest from my shooting. I'd only shoot if I had like an official practice day, and that way I'm totally rested up and 100% for the Saturday and Sunday. Normally, if I'm shooting a lot, I would focus more on lighter weight with higher reps, or just focus on cardio as well. A lot of times at tournaments, I would do simple movements. I would do push-ups, pull-ups, or runs. Last week on my Facebook page, Chris White actually posted a video from the last, well, I shouldn't say the last one, but it was from a World Field Championship that Chris and I shot a gold medal match against one another in Croatia. And there's actually, if you want to go, it's on my personal page. I might be able to repost it. But what's funny about it is I shot 2 good arrows and one was just out. And if you look at the shots, the one that was out was actually my best shot. And that was something that I look back and I remember. The one that was out, it was my best shot. I really focused on finishing with a super strong shot. How I came through the shot, everything was probably my best shot of the match, but it was the arrow that was out and lost me the match. And it's just a perfect example of sometimes it's going to be your day and sometimes it's not. Chris had definitely worked towards earning that gold medal for way more years than I, and it was his time to shine. So there's times where you can make a great shot and for whatever reason it just doesn't go in. You have to take those days just as much as you have to take the days where you maybe don't make a good shot and you're lucky enough for it to go in. So if you haven't won yet and you're waiting for that big win, I can tell you all you have to do is just keep plugging away and be consistent. Consistency is the name of the game if you want to eventually be on the top of a podium. You can ask me questions too.
Is your shot process the same for 3D and target?
It's actually really hard to shoot 300 rounds and be thinking about questions. What was the question?
Is your shot process the same for both 3D and target?
Yeah, the shot, well, so with 3D, you pretty much have to factor in judging the target and moving your sight, okay? Those are two things that you're constantly doing in 3D archery. You're having to judge, you're having to adjust the sight. Sometimes you might have to figure out angle compensation. So I don't like to include those things: knocking arrow, clip release on the string, set sight, judge. Like, I don't like to include those in my shot routine. My shot routine is simply my stance, my grip, my front shoulder, my anchor, my head position, and then pulling through the release. That's my shot routine. I try to keep it down to the basics and the core principles of having proper form and posture. Let's do a few more and then we better wrap it up.
Brad asks, do you have a good sight bar scope combo in mind that would be good for both indoor and 3D?
I'll shoot this exact setup for either one. The only difference that I'll make is I won't shoot, well, here, let me show you guys this. So a lot of people ask what I shoot. So here's what I shoot right here for my indoor setup. It's a black dot that's a little bit bigger than the 10 ring with a white dot in the very center that I put on there with model paint. And that gives me, regardless of how the lighting is, I'm able to still see really well. And but on 3D targets, I'll sometimes have an extra lens where it has a sticker dot on there like that. But usually for 3D, I like to shoot an up pin with a fiber on there. So I'll take this same exact thing, I'll actually reduce the power. I'll go down to like a 0.5 diopter with that, with the up pin, and that's the exact same setup. I really don't do anything for the front sight other than change the lens and go to a fiber. So for those of you who ask, how do you get perfectly steady? Some people really worry about movement in their front sight. If you go back and watch this live feed again, I can guarantee you're gonna see some movement in my bow arm. There's days where it's not like that, but there are days where it is. Today, it is. I've got movement. So you can see, you know, I've got a little bit of movement, so I'm not shooting supers. That's just how it is. Kind of hitting the same holes, you know. The number 1, 2, and 3 are pretty much right there, but I'm not shooting 100% perfectly solid. And again, the important part of this feed is for all of you to understand that you're not going to be perfect every day. At least I'm not. And you have to really focus on setting goals during each practice round so that you can improve tomorrow versus today. My shot right now, I can guarantee you when I go back and watch, I'm probably not going to like how it looks. It's taking me probably 2 or 3 seconds longer than what I'd really like for this shot to go off, but that's how it is, and I'm cool with that. Main thing is, if I feel like I'm going to force something or not make a good shot or a good execution, then me letting down is going to be really important. Now, I can tell you from the fact that I've been away from this for about 3 weeks now, what's going to be really important for me is just repetition and not focusing on, you know, if someone's like, how'd you shoot tonight? I'm not really going to worry about how I scored, because I don't feel like I'm even worthy right now of judging myself according to score. I'm just trying to get myself back into consistency and timing and repetition and just being able to go through my cadence. Is there any other questions?
What's your process for judging yardage at 3D targets?
That I'll save for a different day. Tomorrow I'm going to do a podcast with a special guest. He's getting ready to come out of retirement and dominate some 3Ds, so I'm going to make that announcement tomorrow. Going to have a podcast, so we'll talk with him about judging targets. And other than that, there's going to be some cool live feeds coming up. The whole new Knock On Nation package is starting to roll. We're going to be launching the new website really soon, and we've got some UFC guys coming in. We got some first-time bow hunters coming in. We've got all kinds of cool stuff. Probably going to do some live feeds on some spot and stock hogs here in another week and a half. So we got some cool stuff coming up. Appreciate all you guys tuning in. Please, 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 please make sure you share. Sharing is super important. We have to have that if we're going to keep this whole thing going. And talk to you guys later. I want to get some shooting in. So appreciate it, everybody. Knock on.